live. Let's just give it a few minutes to let people on here. Hello, hello. So we'll wait a few minutes to get people on here. People watching it on replay, we won't have them, sit here for this time. So everybody, how's it going? Mm-hmm. So we already kind of know what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the whole James Charles thing. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes and then we will commence. So what are your guys' thoughts on this whole James Charles versus Wet n Wild situation before we get into this exciting news? All righty, let us look at what happened. Okay, so for everybody that's here, so if you are watching live, thank you for watching live. And if you're watching on replay, thank you for watching. So today we are going to talk about the whole Wet n Wild and James Charles thing. I'm going to kind of give my thoughts on it. You're going to give your thoughts on it. We're going to talk about how he he formulated his palette and whatnot. So basically the gist of it, if you are not sure what happened, just to recap everything. At RuPaul's Drag Con, I don't know if it was in New York. I think it was in New York because I think the one in LA already happened, but I could be mistaken. But in any case, Wet n Wild debuted their new rainbow 40 shade palette, which I thought was very interesting that they are, coming out with such a large palette. And it looked very, very similar to the Morphe and James Charles palette. So obviously this whole thing went down on Twitter and people called Wet n Wild out for copying. James Charles came and said something about them copying. So I thought that was really interesting. So first off, this whole duping thing, the copying thing, honestly, I was really surprised that he said anything because this happens. Well, I'm not surprised James Charles said anything, but I don't think he should have said anything. What do you guys think about that whole copying thing? Do you think it's a big deal? Do you think it's not a big deal? Personally, for me, I think these things get copied all the time. We literally see it Modern Renaissance got ripped off a whole bunch of times. I think even Wet n Wild did that. And then a lot of the you have brands like that Bad Baby brand. We've seen these palettes get ripped off all the time, and it's not even it sucks for the person who's the artist that came up with it, but it just is what it is. If you go to Target, there's a bunch of dupe type products. So that's why even though it's a color cosmetic, it doesn't really matter to me. And then secondly, so let's read the comment that he said in particular. So he said something about so Wet n Wild said something about oh, he got his palette from this Morphe got the palette from this company that I believe is in China based off of the name. I'm not going to even try to pronounce the name. But then he said, "You're tweeting information out of context to start drama. This is beyond unprofessional. This manufacturer is a manufacturer that produces my palette, which I designed and formulated myself. Every company has a manufacturer they buy their stock from, including EU." So my thing about that is that well, first of all, we're going to get into the formulated, but I don't even know if Morphe has their own R&D people at all. I know Wet n Wild as their overall brand has their own R&D people. There is L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, all those people have their own. I don't even know if Morphe has that. So that's not even the best comparison because they would kind of work on the formulas with them. And yeah, they have a manufacturer they buy their stock from, but there's difference between coming up with your own formula and buying stock from them. So, and then for him to say he formulated it himself, we all know that's not right. We all know he's not the person in there formulating it. He's the person who says, I want it more like this, or I want it more like this. And that's what they come up with. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? What do you guys think about that? So for him to say he formulated it, I'm not super annoyed about it as a chemist, but obviously there is chemists behind him that are the ones that are actually coming up with this formula. And I think the way that he acts, you're literally drinking the tea. Oh, that's funny. It's actually coffee. but I do like tea too. I didn't even think about that. And my water's like across the house, so I can't go get it. But yeah, so for him to say, like, oh, I formulated this. No, you did not formulate this. You worked with chemists who formulated it. And I think that's just a really good, yeah, everybody knows he didn't formulate it. But I think it's just interesting because to me, it kind of shows that he doesn't really give credit where credit is due. Like you'll see Norvina and she'll be like, oh, I'm working in the lab with people like Anastasia, and I think that's kind of just shows how it would be like to work with him, is that you like don't get credit for anything. Like he doesn't even say, like we worked with these people. And yeah, he like, even the fact that he says like, oh, like everybody has a manufacturer they get it from. Yeah, he wasn't in the lab mixing up pigments and ingredients. Like they could tell him things and he could learn these things, but that's literally not his job. Doesn't Morphe buy makeup and then put their label on it? I know that's what they used to do. That was the whole like crown brushes thing. Yeah, private labeling. But I don't think they do that as much anymore, or I don't think they should. Like they have enough, they're big enough now and they've got enough investments where I think that they can have formulas like developed for them. But I don't think that they have their own people sitting in a lab like kind of working on this too. Whereas like a lot of other companies do have like R&D departments, but Morphe barely got a quality person after the whole Jaclyn Hill vault thing. I remember because I see these like job postings and they're looking for like a quality manager after that whole debacle. So I can't imagine if they don't even have somebody to track the quality, that they have people like actually like in like an R&D department. Maybe they do have an R&D department, but I just haven't like seen it. And so it seemed like Wet n Wild just found out that they actually bought the palette and then did the same thing. Yeah, Wet n Wild can do that too because it is cheap. So that's the thing, is like all these companies can go buy these palettes or buy a specific formula, because a lot of times the company themselves doesn't even own the formula. It's the manufacturer. So even like it just depends on like the contract and like what they do. But yeah, a company can like create, like they could have even created this formula with James Charles, but at the end of the day, it can be that manufacturer's formula, and then they can go sell it to whoever. It happens all the time. One of my friends, she designs phone cases, and she can work with them to design it, but at the end of the day, like that could be theirs, and they can just go sell it themselves on like Wish or whatever. I think that's why they aren't being scared of being sued. Yeah, exactly. And then even Jen Love's reviews showed that lipstick, that Tatcha and that Too Faced lipstick, and those two were like exactly the same, and even they couldn't get sued. The whole point is that this isn't going to like, no one's going to mistake it, especially if the outside packaging. And yeah, the whole thing, like mostly my issue with it is that he doesn't give credit to the people where credit is due. Like if I were to ever come out with like some sort of like line of something, like I'm terrible at drawing, I'm terrible at designing, I would have to work with a designer to like design whatever it may be. So in that, if that's the case, then I would like want to give credit to the designer. Like I think it's wrong to sit there and be like, oh, I did this, but you didn't do, like you worked with people to do this. And especially when coming up with an eyeshadow palette, because it's like, you, if you're gonna brag that much about the formulation, then that brings us to my next point. So Jen Love's reviews. So she said, what I'm curious about is if he formulated the palette, why didn't he know the red pigments not being eye safe? Just saying. And says maybe he's using the word formulate loosely. Yeah, we understand that. And then meaning that he approved the texture. So that's another thing too. So remember we had this whole issue with the one girl who posted the red stained eyes and they were irritated. So, but the thing is that in this palette, there is unapproved safe red dyes. Like they're okay in like a bronzer, like I have the butter bronzer has one of those colorants in there, but this is meant for your face, so it's not a problem. But with the eyeshadows, this pressed pigment thing has been such a big thing lately because people want these like bright red shadows on their eyes, but they can't call them that. So they have to call them pressed pigment. So if it like, I have the Riviera palette, Jeffree Star has done this, Lunar Beauty Manny's brand has done this, Anastasia's done it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like driving me nuts. Because I don't mind that they put these in there because most people are going to be okay. But my issue with it, why I don't think they should put these in there, because the way that they market these is these palettes are used on the eye. Like all these YouTube videos of people they partner with. James did the same thing. He put it on his eye in his videos. The Anastasia marketing, like you're marketing these things to people, and then for him not to even this one girl, she comes out and says like, "Oh, my eye's irritated," and just to completely like belittle her when that's like a big thing, and like that's important to know if you're going to be bragging that you were so involved with this formula. Megan, I noticed that James instead used the words, "It's so unprofessional for Wet n Wild to say where Morphe purchased the palette, like they leaked a fact about the beauty industry that maybe people didn't realize." Yeah, I think now people are learning a lot more about the beauty industry, which I think is good. I think it's good to be informed, and it is good to be informed. And yeah, you buy these from other places. Like most of these people don't manufacture their own things. ColourPop is one of the very few who can actually manufacture their own products, which is why they can keep their price points so low. James Charles doesn't care about his fans, customers. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way because yeah, like this one girl, like her, I got irritated, and if you would have been like, yeah, like sorry, that it's not meant, it's not supposed to be eye safe. Like we put that on there. People can have this reaction, so just don't use it anymore. Like that's fine. I definitely think it's awesome when you're starting to learn how makeup is actually made. Yeah, and I think that's important. So yeah, so that's my whole deal with the whole like ice, like with the whole pressed pigment thing. Like I don't have a reaction to it, but some people can, and especially with some of these red ones that are used in such excessive amounts, you can like someone can have really really irritated eyes, and for them to market it as like eye safe is just really like to me. I did a Google search and it linked that company from China with Anastasia. I know that Anastasia Beverly Hills does work with companies in China, or at least like a company, because Norvina has flown over there and said that she's like been working over there before. I'm happy for the scandals because the consumers are learning more about the supply chain for cosmetics. Yeah, and I think it's really good that people know how things come about, and that like these people aren't necessarily manufacturing their own products. Also, did you guys see that thing? It was City Color Cosmetics, and they found asbestos in their makeup too. And I'm just like, oh my god, people, like, where are you getting your talc from? Where is it coming from? Because if they correctly sourced talc and would get it sent out for third-party testing to show that it was talc-free, then this probably could have all been avoided. That's what I'm guessing happened. So yeah, so the whole James Charles thing is that yeah, I don't really care if companies dupe things anymore. It sucks for like the person and like the person who created it, but that's just how it is. It happens all the time. Happens to like in every single industry, but people just get more upset when it's their own creation that it happened to. The only thing I do like about the red pigments is allow the products to be vegan, but it's not great for a lot of other reasons. Yeah, and the pigments, the red pigments, that is the good part. But I think it is important to let people know that why, like they call them, like a lot of, like even James Charles' video, he said like, oh, these are pressed pigments and they're very pigmented. And that's why, like, and they don't mention that they're not eye safe. They don't mention why they're not eye safe. Like, I don't know why it's so hard to be like, hey, this isn't approved in the US, but even like the whole fact you mentioned, it's proved, it's like in Europe, and it's like they use it in Europe. But now, but because it's become such a thing that these eyeshadows have to be so pigmented, I think that's where the problem comes, because you're putting these pigments in such high concentration. And then let's see what other tweets I got in here. People can say a lot of things about Jeffrey, but he always talks about pressed pigments, pressed glitters not being eye safe versus eyeshadow. Yeah, as long as people are, upfront about it, I think that's the important part, is just under like saying why. It's kind of like, okay, so there's also like certain, it's I think it's DNC Black #2, and it's eye safe, but it's not like lip safe. So if somebody were to want to use that on their lips and say you're like, oh, I'm going to use this black like pencil liner on my lips, but it's not meant for your lips, it's only meant for your eye, then it's important to be upfront about it and be like, this is why you shouldn't use it, but I use it and I don't have any problems, or like something like that. Do you know how pure the pigments are? They manufactured synthetically or purified from other substances? So a lot of times, I don't know for sure about these lake ones, but a lot of times, like this is a big thing too. Like when people talk about their cosmetics are like 100% natural, your normally your colorants aren't actually natural.